Let's bring in James Dorsey, who is a senior fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies in Singapore. James, thank you for being with us. Just been hearing from our correspondent there about Israel's moves in the occupied West Bank, tanks rolling in and scenes that haven't been seen since the Intifada. But that back then was a very different set of circumstances to what we're seeing now, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, but at the same time, we could be moving into a similar set of circumstances. So the second Intifada turned violent. You saw attacks within Israel itself. Keep in mind that we just had an attack on 3 Israeli buses. I believe it was on Friday. No one was hurt in that attack, but nonetheless, it may be a sign of what is to come. And of course, Israel has been battling for some time what amounts to a burgeoning low-level armed resistance in the West Bank. And what it is doing, and that's even on a broader scale, it's basically saying my security concerns are what is going to dictate the lay of the land. You're seeing that in Syria, where Israelis have said that the Syrian army should not be moving towards the southern Syria and the Golan Heights, and should stay away from Druze areas. That's the principle that's being applied here, much along the lines of what we saw in Gaza.
Where do you see this leading, James? We have the Middle East envoy from the States, Steve Witkoff, arriving on Wednesday night. Do you think that he's going to shake things up? The States are going to shake things up in any way? Or who is going to come to the aid of, I guess, all of those Palestinians who have been displaced from their homes and intervene here, if anyone?
Well, Steve Witkoff, that is the $64,000 question. We've essentially had two sets of, or two notions being put forward by Witkoff. One was definite, absolutely there will be a second phase of the ceasefire. And on the other hand, he's also entertained the notion put forward by the Israelis of a prolongment of the first phase. The likelihood of a second phase is, I think, very slim. We've already seen a even further breakdown, if that was at all possible, in trust or any willingness to believe the other side's word, with the delay of the release of 620 Palestinians in exchange for 6 Israeli captives that were already released by Hamas. We're not even sure that we're going to get on Thursday the final release in the first phase of the ceasefire of the 4 remaining bodies of Israelis killed in Gaza during the war. The second phase really is, sure, it's about prisoner release too, but much more fundamentally in geopolitical and political terms, it's about a total withdrawal from Israel, by Israel from the Gaza Strip, and the installation of some kind of interim government. And I don't see the Israelis agreeing to that at this point.
As you say, it's very difficult to be optimistic about the state of the ceasefire deal, with Israel reneging on the prisoner release and now Hamas halting talks until they're released. And so what do you think is required to get it back on track, or how optimistic do you feel about it?
I'm not sure that I'm optimistic at all. What I do think is that we may get a very different situation. So for the longest period of time, for the last 15 years at least, you've had a situation where Hamas and Netanyahu were relatively comfortable with the situation. And you would get a war every few years. Israel would cut Hamas down to size and they would move on. I think that is what at this point may best suit both Netanyahu and Hamas. For Netanyahu, it means he doesn't have to declare an end to the war, but he doesn't have to go into a total war again. He keeps the Palestinian polity divided and incapable of negotiating a solution or speaking on behalf of the Palestinians. And Hamas remains in business. It remains de facto in control of Hamas, of Gaza, and it already has established degrees of control in various areas. And we saw that, and that's why the Israelis have been so virulent about the way that that Hamas releases hostages, the ceremonies, the pomp and circumstance. or what Netanyahu calls humiliating. And so it may very well be that this sort of ends up in a low level war of attrition over time with no formal agreements.
That is all we have time for. James Dorsey, Senior Fellow at Rajaratnam School of International Studies in Singapore. Thank you so much.
Isabel, good to be with you.